Welcome to Manhwa Recaps, spoilers ahead, watch out, and take care. The manhwa starts with someone screaming inside of Oryu Dong. We see a child crying for his mother, and the mother is yelling for someone to save her baby. We learn that the monster has killed all of the policemen, and some of the civilians begin to panic. The SCP-looking monster raises its hand to finish the baby, and then goes to attack it. We see a blood splurt, and the people are in shock. We see someone stopping their momentum, and the monster's arm has been cut off, and the hero turns around. The arm hits the floor, and the SCP looks at the man wearing a white cap, and gets angry. Our boy is cold and flicks the blood off his hand. This makes the SCP mad and it throws the baby, while dashing. The mom goes to catch her baby, and does. The monster gets close to the man, and slams the floor, but too late. As our hero dodges it, he grits his teeth, then kicks the SCP in its face, sending it flying. We hear it rummaging in the debris. Then it leaps at the man, as it gets close. He shuts its mouth, knocking it into the air. He looks at it, then prepares his fist, and after the first one we see him luffy the SCP. He continues his barrage, sending the SCP backward through the air. It lands on the floor, and he stares at it. The spectators are in disbelief. Nothing but silence from the crowd. And slowly they begin to clap. And he looks over as they cheer him on. They ask him who he is, and he donawalls them. Then the mother calls out to him, then thanks him, saying she's unsure on how to repay him. He looks at her, then leaps away, bouncing roof to roof. A civilian says superhumans really did exist, and the hero keeps hauling cheeks. It cuts to Seo Yunhai, and a teacher is talking about natural disasters, and surely they all know it refers to natural phenomena, and it just means an event such as earthquakes, typhoons, etc. But we also call events that humans can't stop as natural disasters. Then he asks if he needs to even explain when the world is overrun with them nowadays. One of the students says big words make him sick, and the other one shows him on his phone the white cap superhuman fighting the monster. He talks about how this one is high res, and close up, they start pogging out over the fight, and how they'd insta-die to an SCP. Some of the comments mention F for the police officer, and they wonder where the monsters are coming from. Their teacher sees them talking, and asks what they are whispering about. An alert goes off over the intercom, and it's a disaster alert. Everyone hears this, and we see one of the students is asleep. The students panic while he's slumped, and the intercom says it's an Inhuman alert, and it's been spotted near Incheon Port, so school has been cancelled. The teacher tells them to calm down, and to move in an orderly fashion out of school, and go home immediately. A girl says it's only been a week, and it's the third time this year. It's getting more common. The sleeping student gets a phone call from someone named Ji-Ru. He answers it, and asks where. Ji-Ru tells him it's Incheon Port, and don't forget your earpiece. We learn a few years ago, an Inhuman killed 70 people and wiped out the city of Gangneung, and a repeat would be bad. And the girl is wondering why the dude is sleeping. She calls out to him, and Ji-Ru tells him to hurry. The boy's name is Kang, and he looks over at the girl, and asks her what. She says there was an alert and he needs to get home. Awkward stare down ensues, and he tells her he'll go. She wonders why he's so carefree, and says he won't live for long. He watches her leave, and then starts to go through his bag, and decides to change in the bathroom. He looks around, and says to be as inconspicuous as possible. It cuts Incheon Port. We see a man inside a car, driving straight to the Inhuman, telling it to die. He hits it directly, and the back of the truck lifts off the ground then drops back to the floor. He realizes he is screwed, and it looks at him. It raises its fist, then Hulk smashes the truck, turning Buddy into a pancake. Another dock worker sees this, and the guy beside him starts crying. The guy tells him to stop making noise. He tells him they can survive, so just be quiet and to hide, but if it comes to it, he will fight. Ji-Ru asks Kang where he is, and he tells him he just changed. Ji-Ru says it's bad and he'll give live directions. Kang says he's leaving now, and Ji-Ru double checks he has his earpiece. Then asks about his backpack and uniform. Kang says it's well hidden. It isn't. Ji-Ru says he's worried, but it's about 11 minutes away. So just run in the direction he says. Kang quickly leaps out of the window and soars through the air. Back at the dock they see the Inhuman peeping on them, and the guy says fuck, and says it's time to fight, then loses his speaking privileges. The crying guy sees his friend turned into Play-Doh, starts crying, then joins his friend. It sees another worker running away, and jumps to him, landing behind the man, startling him. He begs for his life, then gets yeeted into a storage container. He starts violently coughing, and slowly pans over to see the Inhuman. It stretches his hand out to his face, but a man yells stop, while hitting it on the back of the head with a wrench. The Inhuman slowly turns around, and the boss tells him to stop, and calls him a pig monster. Worker. We see Kang hauling absolute cheeks, and Wiro says he's as fast as a plane, while he bops down mid. He tells Kang to keep going straight, and that there's a news update, the Inhuman task force is on their way, and be careful because its strength isn't known. Kang says he can see the port, and we see the boss telling his worker he can take this chance and run away. The guy just talks instead, and the boss calls him dumb. The boss says he could have left, but didn't want to leave his man, and he starts crying saying he'll miss his family. The monster approaches him, but then walks away. Bossman says please just leave, but the Inhuman grips onto a cargo container, and lifts it up. Bossman wonders what he's doing, then he baseball pitches the container at him. As it flies at him, he just says oh shit. Kang quickly runs in at the container, then jumps into the air and kicks it away from Bossman, who makes a one-piece face, as Kang stops his momentum. Kang says it's dangerous to throw things like that. Wiro asks if he's nervous or not, but Kang ignores him, and he stares down the SCP. Kang asks if he should talk to it, and we see he has a camera on his hat. Wiro tells him to go for it. He recalls him telling Kang to try and talk to them before fighting, and while they are monsters. If they can find one that talks they might be able to find out where they are coming from, and their plan, and it's better than outright killing them. Kang asks it if it can speak, and tells it he's met a few guys like it, so if he can understand, and then the SCP pulls some skinwalker shit and starts making sounds. It says then speaks enchantment table, and leaps at Kang, slamming the floor below him. They make eye contact. Then it prepares a second attack, hitting Kang, but he blocks it. He leaps off the wall, and creates distance from the Inhuman, and says it's faster than it looks. Wiro asks he's okay, and Kang tells him yes, but talking didn't work. Wiro tells him to be careful. We see a helicopter fly in, and we see a news reporter and her cameraman. She says they are at Incheon port, and in order to report safely, they are 600 meters in the air, and the white-cap superhuman is there. And the Inhuman task force has arrived. We see their military convoy, and their captain tells them to stand by. One of his men tells him that the port is too narrow to use the tanks and railgun. The captain says that's fine. The soldier asks how they'll capture it if they can't use it, and the captain asks if he's lost, because he's not understanding the true power of an Inhuman, and they aren't something that their weapons can take care of. Their special intelligence agency has analyzed Whitecap's power, and it's something that can easily exceed the military's power, same with the Inhuman, so if Whitecap loses they are screwed. The soldier asks why they are even here, and the captain says even they have a plan B. We see a helicopter above Kang, and we see it's being broadcast live, and the news reporter is saying Whitecap is giving it his all, and while his identity is unknown, he is clearly fighting for humans. But currently it looks as if he is losing. Kang runs as the SCP is behind him. And he says he's fast, and it's why you shouldn't judge a book by its cover. Kang sees a fist rushing at him and it hits the container. Kang escapes upward. Then he jumps off the top, diving straight down, and the SCP turns into a chipmunk, then spits something at Kang. He quickly dodges it, but it causes him to lose balance. The SCP takes this chance to grab onto his leg, then it begins to scream. Kang focuses, then we see him bounce along the floor, crashing into a container. The Inhuman sees the hole he left, and Wiro yells out for Kang. The soldier asks his captain what to do, and the captain says no shot, he dies here. He says their mission is to help without getting in his way. He calls out for plan B. And the back of the door is kicked open. We see a man grab onto the roof, then land atop it. He points his cyborg arm into the air, and readies his gun, then shoots. We see the bullet soar through the air, and the SCP turns around and eats it to the head. The soldier sees it drop to the floor, and the captain calls out headshot. but the SCP quickly slams the floor, shocking them, and it starts to get up. It turns around pissed. The captain says it's coming. And the cyborg man readies another round, then fires it, passing through the SCP's head. He readies again, then shoots, but the Inhuman just tanks it. He starts spam shooting it. The Inhuman continues walking forward. It puts its hands up, and the sniper readies another shot, but sees something, and stops looking down the sight. The Inhuman also turns around, and looks at the hole where he left Kang. He hears footsteps, then sees Kang grab the edge. He steps out of it, saying he was glad he was thrown into something. Wiro sees Kang, and sighs in relief, then tells Kang he thinks the Inhuman is a dud, since it cannot talk, or doesn't want to. Kang says it looks that way, but says oh well and time to rock his shit. Kang readies himself, walking slightly, then jumps forward a bit, vanishing. The Inhuman is surprised, and we see Kang dropping his leg on the SCP. Turning its head into a pancake, Kang quickly prepares an attack, and shoves his hand into its mouth. Then Kang turns around, stomping the floor, throwing the Inhuman over his shoulder. It watches him as it's falling. Kang grits his teeth, then slams it into the floor, creating a massive shockwave in the floor. The soldiers and the helicopter are feeling them, and once they subside, we see the Inhuman face first in the floor. Kang slowly stands up, and his schoolmates, the soldiers, the news reporters, Wiro, and the soldier all watch in awe. The news girl says it wasn't clear, but the Earth just took a massive hit. Kang sees something, and the Inhuman starts to wiggle its feet, and presses onto the floor with his hands. Its feet start to touch the floor, and it exorcist poses while trying to say something. Kang and Wiro see it, and then it starts to growl at them, but plops onto the floor. Kang looks relieved, and Wiro says it's over, right? He thought it was gonna get back up. Kang says it should be dead. He felt its brain exploding, so even if it gets back up, he'll just pummel it to death, and it wasn't as strong as the one from the Mayan Island alert. Wiro thinks about how Kang had a rough time with that one. We see a dripped out man laughing, saying the fights are best when viewed live, and says as rumored Kang is ruthless. And he asks someone beside them if he used even half his power, and we see her name is Dan Yang. The man leaps off saying he'll be back. And Kang notices something, so he turns around. Wiro asks who this dude is, saying he's dripped out. Kang asks for his name. The man begins to laugh, and says damn white cap, your glare is scary. Wiro asks what's the deal with this guy, and where he came from, and they square up. Kang looks at him, then looks up telling Wiro there's another one. And she stares back at him. The news girl says something strange has happened, and in front of White Cap, a mysterious man has appeared, and they seem to be talking, but they can't tell what it's about. One of his classmates asks if they are going to fight, and the soldier asks his captain what's going on. The captain says he's not sure, and he says there's nothing they can do about it, just keep your guard up until White Cap leaves. The cyborg looks like he's thinking about something. The man tells Kang it ended so suddenly, and it was flashy and explosive, just like Ketchup Man, who is like the All Might of this world, and an actor. Kang is happy to receive the compliment, asking which part of him is like Ketchup Man. Wiro notices him getting flustered, and because he's weak to compliments, he tells him to pull himself together, and to find out who he is and where he came from. Kang says okay, and stutters hard. Wiro asks what he's even saying, and Kang might not be good at reading people, but he can tell the man is dangerous. The man tells Kang he's been keeping an eye on him, TV broadcasts, social media, streams. Anytime there was an Inhuman alert, Kang would appear, and he came here to do something. Watching the fight was a bonus, but he didn't come here for him, so he won't hurt him at all. Kang asks why he should believe it, and the man smirks. Wiro asks if he remembers the guys he met at the city of Samchik. How they approached him acting friendly, then tased him, and the Inhuman Defense Force was there too, so this might be the same thing, and the man is a government agent. Kang stares at him, and the man says he feels as if he's being despised too much, but he'll tell him something interesting. What does the world refer to him as? Kang says a superhuman. The man tells him he's also a superhuman, to their surprise. And that there are a lot more than just the two of them, those who defy logic and are stronger than he can even imagine. Wiro says he expected it, since there are 2 verified superhumans in America and Europe, but Korea only had Kang so far. It cuts to the United States, and a man is watching the news broadcast wondering if the man is White Cap's follower, and he tells someone named Pearl it's weird. She says she's seen him before, and the man tells her White Cap is famous. She says not him. The guy with the braids then asks if they can't listen to them. He tells her unfortunately not. It cuts again to Scotland, to a Burger King. A woman is watching the news, and her sister calls out to her saying she bought them tickets and it's time to go. The girl says let's leave now then. We're taken to Moscow, and a man says Mr. Bashalov, do you know who that is? And he replies no clue. The man says he thinks it's a superhuman, and Bashalov says he doesn't care, and he looks like an asshole. Back from our tour around the world, Kang asks so what, and he doesn't care if he's a superhuman or not, so don't follow. Kang turns around, and the man says he's leaving when he has more to say. Kang hungry. He says it's fine, and they can meet at his school, to finish their talk. Kang stops walking, then turns around. Him and Ji-Roo are surprised. The man asks what, saying he's a student right, when not wearing the mask. Kang gets slightly nervous, and Ji-Roo is sweating bullets. The man says he looks shocked, but he'll keep it a secret. And pass it on to the pink-haired dude in his earpiece, that his lips are sealed. They are shocked he knows Ji-Roo too, and the man explains how the pink-haired man isn't a normal person, and from the mask he's wearing, to the tiny camera, he is a genius with potential, and he had to resist the urge of kidnapping him. And he'll have to play with him, while White Cap is at school. Ji-Roo wonders how much he knows, and the man laughs, asking if he went overboard with his joke, because the atmosphere is different. Kang says he guessed it can't be helped, and the atmosphere turns serious. He says he's a superhuman, right? Ji-Roo tells him not to fight, and Kang says he's his only family, so he'll make sure he can't get close to him. The man and his companion stare, and the man says he didn't think he'd get so mad, and he's not his enemy so they can talk without hostility. Kang says he doesn't care. The man says it's his choice, so they'll fight? Kang dashes off the floor, charging straight at the man. Ji-Roo screams, and everyone wonders why they are fighting. Kang readies his fist at the man. But he stretches his hands out, stopping the attack and not budging. Kang looks surprised by this. And Ji-Roo is too. Kang brings his fist back, and goes for a follow-up attack, and backhands at the man, but the man vanished. He calls him a tsundere, saying he looks like he wants him dead. The man is on his fist, asking why he held back. The man jumps off, social distancing himself, saying if he wants to keep fighting, then he shouldn't test the water and he's foolish for holding back. Because he is also a superhuman, so give it his all or else he'll die. He says once they get started then the area will be destroyed, because that is the only way the fight can go. Kang doesn't say anything, but Ji-Roo says he needs to calm down, because he isn't wrong. And there's nothing to gain from them fighting. While it does bother him they appeared out of the blue, while knowing their identity, they should not fight right now. As he's definitely a superhuman, and he's not fought one before, so believing he isn't an enemy and getting out is the best choice. The man scratches his ear, then says it looks like he understands now, and they'll meet again so they can talk then. Kang tells him to wait, and asks for his name, or else he won't let him go. Kang introduces himself as Lim Kang to the man. The man hesitates then says his name is Nangi, and walks away. His friend Yang jumps down, and he tells her it's time to go. She asks if he wants her to look at his arms. And he recalls stopping his punch, and we see his arm is red. He laughs saying it's not bad, and it's time to go. Then they leap off. They watch them leave. Kang doesn't say anything, and the USA group see they've left, same with the Russians, and Bashalov is angry they just left. The other man says it was for the better, or else they'd have destroyed the area. The port workers call out to Kang, saying they wanted to express their gratitude to him, and they thank him. They say there were almost goners, asking how they can repay him. Bossman says he knows a really good pork belly stew place. Kang says it's fine, then jumps off, acting cool after destroying even more land. The soldier tells his captain that Kang is leaving. The captain says to send in the corpse recovery team and move quickly. The sniper bee quickly tells the captain that the bullet's shape or weight isn't the issue, and changing the gunpowder doesn't matter. And while they might have produced a strong anti-tank round, It's not much better than normal precision rifles, so a toy like this is useless. And if they can't find something stronger, they'll all die. The captain says okay, and he'll pass the message on. The sniper crushes the bullets, and the captain receives a phone call. It's the commander asking for a sitrep. He tells him Whitecap left, after dealing with the Inhuman. The commander Baek Oh-jin asks why he's having to call him first, and the captain apologizes. Oh-jin says to listen closely, and the most important part is the corpse, and he's already dealt with the other agencies, so just put it in the vehicle and leave. The captain says they're already working on it. Oh-jin tells him that once it's loaded up they can pass it on, and his mission will be over once he retreats. The captain says understood, and angrily hangs up. We see the commander call someone, and it rings for a bit before the other side asks if it's urgent. He says not exactly, and he just wanted to give a report on the Inhuman invasion. There are 14 dead, and 2 in critical condition. The voice says to listen, and he doesn't care about any of that, just give him a summary. Oh-jin tells him the corpse will make it to somewhere called Falcon area soon, around tomorrow night. One of the men beside him tells the important guy he's gotta go somewhere, and he tells Oh-jin he needs to give a speech, and not to mess up, or waste his time, as it's his final warning. He asks why he's even mentioning the deaths, and he wants to gag just from having to talk to these ants. He clears his throat, then walks out onto stage. He's introduced as the hope of the new generation, the forerunner of a peaceful world, and his name is Marcus Gerald. Back at Incheon port, we see the corpse has been secured, and it's ready for takeoff. They clear the area, and the VTOL takes off. The soldier asks about the transport vehicle, and the captain says they don't know anything about it. Nan-gi watches it leave, saying it's headed to Falcon. We see Ketchup Man reaching his arm out, grabbing a monster man by his throat, saying he'll only ask once more, so answer carefully if you want to live. He asks where Sherlock's base is. The man tries to speak, but can't, and Ketchup Man says he gave him a chance. Then he turns around readying to throw the man. Then yeets him toward the ground. He crashes into the side of a building, and man is out of it. Ketchup Man dive bombs down, extending his hand for the unyielding ketchup smash. The monster screams save me, only to get absolutely bodied. He spits blood out, and Ketchup Man tells him not to be a wuss, and it wasn't even a tenth of his power, and he'll spare him, so tell Sherlock, as long as I am here, nobody can touch Earth. The citizens look overjoyed, and a news girl says as expected of Ketchup Man, and how he stopped the monster's rampage. We see him peacefully negotiating in the background, and the woman says he is Earth's hope, and the hero of the ages. The superhuman goat, and then he hits a back double by. Then the credits roll, and we see that it's a TV show that Kang is watching. He asks how is he meant to wait a week. Ji-Roo starts to wake up, and he asks Kang if he isn't tired after all that fighting yesterday, then calls him obsessed with Ketchup Man. Kang tells him he had to make sure to catch the premiere, and to make sure to watch the rerun later today, and starts to talk about the story. Ji-Roo tells him to stop there, and Kang starts fangirling about being told he's similar to Ketchup Man. Ji-Roo tells him to stop obsessing, and he's going back to bed, also that school isn't cancelled today. Kang asks why he told him too late. Ji-Roo tells him that he forgot something about how it's resuming since the Inhuman was defeated. Ji-Roo tells him to close the door at least, because it's annoying. It cuts to Incheon, on the way to school, and Kang sees some students talking about how Whitecap got owned, because the braided man easily blocked his punch. His friend says he has brain delay, and it doesn't mean he got owned. Dr. Brain Delay says that you can tell he was at a disadvantage. His friend says so what, Whitecap is the goat, then asks if he's going to try and fight the monsters, because he's just a keyboard warrior on PUBG. Brain Delay makes a funny face, and the real Chad keeps saying to stop looking down on Whitecap, because he's risking his life to keep them safe, and that he's a hero. Then Brain Delay says he's heard he's a cyborg. Beavis and Butthead keep ripping into each other, and one of them goes to swing and hits someone. The man looks down, angry, and calls him ugly asking if he wants to die. Brain Delay starts to quiver, because he recognizes the guy as Choi Tae-ik. Tae-ik keeps barking at the guy, then notices Kang staring at him. He asks Kang if he's trying to start something. Kang is a little confused, and Tae-ik tells him to stop staring. Kang turns his head saying sorry, and Tae-ik tells him he'll remember his face. If he glares at him again he'll rip his eyes out. Brain Delay flames his drip, and tells his friend they are screwed. He asks why and Brain asks if he's heard about the Gundo gang. It's a gang that is made by a bunch of good fighters, and nobody is their match here at Incheon, and that Taik is one of their captains. Buddy starts to have a meltdown, and Brain Delay calls Kang a normie saying he's also going to get beaten up, and tells his friend to just stay clear of their gang. Inside the classroom we hear a girl saying the name Hong over and over, then a girl wakes up, asking her friend what she wants. Her friend says she's called out to her 10 times, and asks if she's going to keep hurting her face, and that she told her to quit boxing. Hong asks if she's her mother or something, and we learn the other girl is Yo Jin Yo. They notice Kang walking beside them, and Jin Yo calls out to him. He asks what she wants, and she tells him his zipper is down. They make some cute faces, and Jinju tells Hong she's leaving, while Kang zips it up. Hong says she smells like cigarettes, then tells her to stop hanging out with those guys. Doesn't say who. Jinju hits her with an Uno reverse on the mother line, saying if she quits boxing she'll consider it. Hong calls her dumb, then notices Kang struggling with his zipper. She says he's also an idiot. We learn her full name is Hong Moo-hee. It cuts to the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and we see a splash. A fisherman notices it, he looks over, wondering what it was. Then sees a shadow in the water. He looks over the edge to see what it is. We get a flashback of 5 minutes ago, we see a penguin doll beside another fisherman. The Dr. Eggman look-alike asks what it's for, and the other man tells him it's for someone named Ruby's birthday. Eggman says he should get her something pretty, so why a penguin? The man tells him her dream is to go to Antarctica to find penguins. Eggman asks if he's seeing her today, and the man says she's gonna forget his face. Eggman laughs, asking if she told him that, and he says time flies when you watch children grow. And he reminisces about how he never got his daughter a proper gift. The man says to get her a doll too, and Eggman says think about her age, and to put the penguin into the cabin. The man says he can't break this promise with his daughter. And the flashback is caught up to the current. We see the shadowy figure emerge from the water. And it's a hand that reaches out past Eggman. Then slams the boat, the man crashes in the cabin, wondering what's going on. He calls out for Eggman only to see Eggman turned into a human pancake. It cuts back to Kang's high school, and the teacher says they've started to appear more often, making everyone afraid. He does a cute drawing of them, saying they're not sure when the SCPs will appear. The teacher's name is Park Chang-sik. He sees they are excited about not having a lesson, and he says that he's sure they all know Inhumans just like the name suggests. They are not human, and possess tremendous physical capabilities. They are monsters who murder humans. And until you come across one, you can't even imagine how scary they are. In the past 5 years there have been 37 cases of them appearing, and a total of 517 deaths. Korea alone has had 6 of the incidents, and with the recent it was 7. Just yesterday at the port 14 people died, and among the incidents, the last 5 have been resolved by White Cap. He starts to list out the incidents in which Kang diffed the enemies. Due to White Cap's appearance, there have been many rumors being circulated, but they are all baseless, due to how little information is known, making the Superhumans just as mysterious as the SCPs. But for the other 2 incidents that didn't involve White Cap, there was the first incident in 2015 that alerted the world to their existence, and the monster's corpse was left at the scene. And the next incident in 2016, with over 75 casualties. IT was the first undefeated Inhuman. Called the Hepta Horn due to its appearance, according to the victims, there was a long-haired man that fought against it, and they suspected the long-haired man who stopped it was killed by it, but he injured the Hepta, so it's currently waiting until it's healed. This paranoia is what led to the creation of the Center for Inhuman Disaster Alert, CEDA, and they've assigned levels to Inhumans, and this is also what sparked the creation of the ISSTF. The question is, who is the long-haired man? Did he die? Where is the Hepta Horn? And with White Cap, who appeared around the time of the long-haired man's disappearance, who is he? Are they truly unrelated? Most importantly, where do the Inhumans come from? He sees all of his students are asleep from the lecture, and he tells them to wake up before the bells ring, and he'll say one more thing. Just because it isn't a lesson, it doesn't mean they can sleep. A student's job is to learn, and while tests aren't that important, what matters is that they are invested in their society as they are the future. He says it's just his opinion, and he'll see them next time. Moo-hee is the only one awake. It cuts to the teacher in his car, talking, saying he had to leave early so he gave a talk and left, and he had to do it early because it's the anniversary of his son's death. He looks at the photos of his son, crying, saying he has to see his son, and he will pray his son doesn't see any monsters in heaven. Right in the feels. Back to the boat, we get a second look at the lizard SCP. And the man starts to run for his radio. Then picks it up, hitting the emergency button. He screams over the radio, and starts to tell them the coordinates. But gets his face slammed by the SCP, but is still conscious. The caked up lizard stares at his new toy, and the man groans. Then says save me while crying. The people on the radio ask what the boat's name is. It cuts to people having a great time. Unlike the previous man, with tons of people relaxing atop a cruise ship named the Opera. At the bridge, we learn that they were the ones to have received the emergency transmission. It's 10 nautical miles away, but in the opposite direction of their path, but it's only 25 minutes away. Mario sternly tells him to change course, and prepare for a rescue. We see the penguin doll, and the man's body is lying beside it. The skinwalker takes his form and stares at the Opera. Then, it takes us back to Kang's school. A pig says he's hungry, and his classmate tells him to shut up about it. One of them is named Changriel, and the pig is Daebang. They start to talk about the Gundo gang, but it's not really relevant to the story, it's more so they can introduce Quan Chol. He's apparently really strong, hates bullies, and generally dislikes fighting. But one of the head bullies of their school picked a fight with him, and he got ratioed. They start to get their food, and Daebang asks for extra, and the girl says he should get something else. He tells her he doesn't like it, she then says okay, saying she can do it. He asks if he can call her mom, and Changriel kicks him. Speaking of pigs, we see Kang going to town, and someone pulls a seat up beside him. We see it's Quan Chol, and he asks Kang why he's always eating alone. Then he gets emo because he eats alone, too, since he has no friends. Then he says Kang also seems like that. Kang thinks about Ji-Ru, but realizes it's his only friend. Chol notices his knuckles are pronounced, and he asks Kang if he does any sports. Kang tells him he's self-learning Taekwondo. Chol laughs, then says they should eat together from now on, and Kang agrees. Someone turns into a ragdoll, then slides along the floor. A group appears, and tells the guy he's slow. We learn they are the Gundo gang, Muhi's group, and Daebang's group both see this. Chol starts to get angry, and Kang just munches. Taik, the beanpole from earlier, says he's going to pick 5 people and beat them up. It then takes us to the States again, and a man tells the Secretary of Defense to wait. The secretary says he feels so helpless. The man tells him some people are here, and it's the woman from earlier, and her associate Withrow. Pearl tells James they haven't heard anything yet, and James says time is important, so they'll talk while they leave, but the summary is it's a worst-case scenario. She asks what it is, and he tells her a cruise ship, the Opera, has been attacked in the middle of the ocean. Pearl and Withrow are shocked, and she says that is horrible. Withrow says everyone is trapped like rats. James tells them exactly, and there's a bigger issue. Pearl cuts him off, saying to fill them in while they rush there. James says a helicopter is ready, then asks the secretary if he has any words for them. He says no, just come back safely. Then they head out. He sighs, and says he was too scared to speak, just because of their presence. We swap locations again. This time, Yang is talking to Nangi, saying the media is going crazy about their encounter with White Cap, and people are researching them. She even has a bounty now. He laughs, asking if they did something wrong. She asks if they really needed to reveal themselves like that, knowing it was being broadcasted. He says it doesn't matter, and he has to do it, but he'll explain later. Since the world will soon fall into chaos, he's trying to decide which side is better to join. Since a game is only fun when it's balanced. Back to Pearl and them. They board the helicopter, and James comments that it feels like he's going to his funeral, then tells them about their seatbelts, but realizes it's dumb. The helicopter takes off. James explains that it's 500 miles away, so it'll take 2 hours, so he'll take this time to explain the situation. Earlier today, there was an SOS sent to a Navy base, and it said they were under an Inhuman attack, and that it was the SS Opera, which is a cruise ship that travels between the US and the UK. While the damage is unknown, the tensions are high. So based on this, They immediately contacted Pearl, but since she was in Scotland, they couldn't just waste time. So the ISSTF and the UDT were deployed, and they sent out around 5 squadrons. Pearl asks if they are in combat. James tells her they lost communication within 20 minutes of them being deployed, and as unbelievable as it is, all of the squads are probably annihilated. But there's a bigger issue. They both ask what it is. James tells them that the opera is on autopilot, and will ram into Florida at this rate. Withrow says it would be deploying Inhumans on the land. James says it's no different than a Florida man. But because of that, they've deployed fighter jets with miniature nuclear missiles to destroy the opera before it reaches land. This angers both of them. James looks anxious, saying that since the survivors are unknown, the government picked what they thought was the best course of action. He starts to shiver, saying they don't know anything about the situation. Pearl tells him to stop trembling. He says yes, ma'am. She tells him not to be so worried, because she's here now. Back to the high school, Taik is still going to beat up 5 people, and he starts with the kid on the floor, grabbing his head. He says he ruined his mood, and he's not done with him yet. He yells at him, and tells them to stop. Taik asks what she said. She repeats it to him, and everyone is shocked by how fearless she is. Chol and Kang are also surprised. He looks determined, and her friend notices she is gone. Taik yeets the boy away, and starts walking towards her, asking if they've put something in the food, and he tells her equal rights, equal lefts. She says catch these hands, and he raises his hand to hit her. She flinches, and Chol says the rumors are true, and he's holding his arm, asking how he's meant to attend in this atmosphere. Kang watches as Chol calls him a freak. Some mophead asks who he is, and people tell him who Chol is. Changriel pushes Piggy's head out of the way. Taik sighs, then turns around, kicking Chol, asking if he's lost his mind. We see it knock him backward, and Taik starts to stutter, when he sees Chol has blocked his kick. Chol says sometime today. Daebang and Changriel cheer him on. Kang watches as Chol goes in for a kick, but Taik blocks it, causing him to bend over. Chol takes this chance to get close, and Kang is surprised to see that Chol has the combos. Taik's friends call out to him, and he stops himself. He spits blood out, then tells Chol that he's going to kill him, so beg for mercy. Chol wonders how he's still standing after that blow. Some fat dude yells to stop there, and don't fight on this sacred ground. Taik tells Radish's head to back off, and he says she thought he was an Inhuman. Me too. Radish tells him that a teacher is coming, so stop here. Reel says he probably ate the teacher. Debeek explains that Radish is the biggest of the Gundo's 3 leaders. No shit. Radish puts his hand on Taik's back, guiding him away. Taik turns around, saying he'll finish it next time. Radish backs him up, saying that Chol went too far today, and he'll see soon, while biting his lip. Some students are scared in front of Kang, and he burps loudly, and the students don't know what the loud sound was. It cuts back to Pearl on the helicopter. James says they've arrived, and James asks what their plan is. Pearl says, open the door, and he tells her they are still hella high in the air. Is she sure? She says yeah, and they open it. James hands them earpieces saying they work based on biometrics, so as long as nothing happens, they can communicate, and he's their middleman. Pearl stands in the doorway, saying she's got it, and to contact the higher-ups, and that since she's here now, send the nukes back. He tells her okay, and he wishes them the best. Pearl and Withrow drop out of the helicopter and start zooming down, landing on the helipad. They both see nothing but destruction. Withrow comments on the situation, and she says, it's time to go. There's an Inhuman watching her, speaking in perfect English, while it's surrounded by friends. James asks Pearl for a moment, because he needs to tell her something. The ship is hella big, so it's easy to get lost, so unless the SCP approaches first, it'll be hard to find it. Withrow says he wonders if it'll show up if they make some noise. Pearl suggests they'll need to split up, and James says she's right, so split up between upper and lower levels. James says one should go to the engine deck, while the other goes to the cargo area. Then the one on the top floor can move down, and the bottom floor can move up, look for survivors, and insta-kill the SCP. James says his only concern is that if they move together, They could defeat it together, but since they are solo, they'll need to 1 versus 1 it. Pearl says it can't be helped, they don't know if there are any survivors, so pick the fastest option. Withrow says he'll take the upper level, she says she'll head to the lower ones, and alert the other if they fight. She Super Mario's off the boat, then readies her fist, punching into the boat, sliding down the side until she stops her momentum. She looks over to her side, and sees there's a hole for something, then kicks off the wall to gain momentum, then crashes into the side of the ship, jumping through the hole she made. She does a superhero pose, then looks up, and we see she's inside of the cargo area. James tells her where she is, then asks how the situation is. She says she doesn't know yet, and everything looks normal so far. But she'll need to look around. James wonders if the lower floors are unaffected, then asks Withrow how it looks on his end. He says nothing new yet, he's just been finding bodies, all of the centers are just dead people, looking like a zombie movie. James says the SCP is playing hide and seek with them. On Withrow's end, he's breaking up. James suddenly hears static in his ear. He wonders why the comms are messing up, and says it could be the Bermuda Triangle. Withrow walks through a corridor filled with bodies, then hears a man talking about his wife. He quickly tells James he found a survivor, but the dude is schizo as hell, and keeps talking. It's just static on James's end, and he gets mad that he's so useless. Pearl calls out to both of them, then wonders what's up with her earpiece. She hears a small child say her name, and she turns around to see a little girl. The girl asks if she's there to save them. She says that's right, but she's not a Mrs. Single joke. Withrow makes it to some bloodied doors, then opens it leading into the event hall. He says it reeks, and the garbage in his ear isn't working. He sees Pearl standing there, and he calls out to her, but she doesn't respond. She turns around, and he asks how she's already in the upper level. He quickly realizes it isn't Pearl, but a damn skinwalker. He sees it quickly appear in his face, and bites at him. He makes a pained face, and we see a lot of blood. He groans while pouring out like a drink dispenser. And we see that the SCP had taken a mick chunk out of his arm. He wonders what's going on as it leaps at him. He dodges it, and hides, saying he was careless. And if he were any slower, he'd have lost his head. He's confused about what's happening, wondering if it's a mimic from Elden Ring. Even though he let his guard down, it's powerful. His eyes widen, and he quickly ducks under an attack. He sees the SCP's real face, then raises his leg up, kicking it away. He hears it getting back up, then sees it reach its hand out, and it begins to stand up to reveal its true form. He says he can't believe it, and takes off his cloak, stepping on it and ripping it, wrapping it around his arm, using it to stop the bleeding. He tells it to give back his arm, and it begins dashing at him. Back to Jamie's POV, he's glad the radar works still, but says Withrow's movements are weird, and he might be in combat. The pilot says the storm is getting worse, and James says he knows. The pilot recommends they land on the deck. Pearl is escorting the child, and she tells everyone that Pearl is here. The survivors see her, and tell her they are hiding from it. She says if there are this many left, she needs to hurry. They beg for her to save them all. We see a wine bottle crash onto the floor, then the SCP steps on it, and quickly begins to bounce around the room with Withrow. It prepares a punch for Withrow, but he blocks it. It takes advantage of him missing an arm, and attacks his side, but he stops it with his leg. They struggle for a second, and he says it's surprising to be this cornered in a fight. The SCP opens its mouth, and he knees it closed, then leaps away from it. Withrow clicks his tongue, but says its ability is useless in a fight, then lets out a sigh, saying he needs to end it here. His eyes begin to glow blue, and the SCP notices something is up. Withrow looks over, and spots some barrels. He stares at one, then runs toward it, preparing his leg and then smashing it, causing it to explode. He focuses on the liquid, and we see it harden, while it flies at the SCP, hitting it all over. Withrow watches it, and realizes it's not enough, so he grabs a bottle from the table, picks it up, smashing it. As the liquid pours out, he begins to harden it, while saying it's been a tiring day, and he's no longer in the mood to mess around. Then leaps off the floor, straight into the SCP. We get a flashback of Pearl's team talking about Withrow being from East Harlem. Ben says he doesn't look dangerous, but his gaze does. James says that he annihilated the Bloods, and he defeated them without a scratch. Ben asks about another gang who got arrested after being found all knocked out, and James tells him he did it too. Ben says sheesh, he did what the government couldn't. James tells him to shush while Pearl talks to him. She tells him considering that his body can withstand bullets, she can tell he's superhuman. But then asks how he stopped the injured people's bleeding immediately, and not to keep it a secret from her. His eyes begin to glow, and she's shocked, as he tells her it's simple, while solidifying her coffee. He says he isn't sure how he can do it, but he can harden any liquid. James and Ben start to pog, and he tells her that the range is around 10 meters. He doesn't know how, but he knows that he can activate it at will, which requires a lot of energy. She asks if it's like freezing, and he tells her it's slightly different, and while it's similar in principle, the liquid becomes too hard to call it freezing, and it's closer to the hardness of diamond. She says changing composition is hard to believe, but since he can do it, then it can be a useful weapon. We see him about to stab it in the face, and he says, of course, if you harden a liquid and apply great force to it, it's stronger than most firearms. The SCP begins to cry out, then swings his arm backward, backhanding Withrow, sending him flying into the wall. He grunts, and stares at the monster, saying he missed even though he put all of his strength into it, and due to his arm, his balance is off. His eyes widen as the SCP starts running at him. He quickly dodges the attack, beginning to sprint away, and he notices that he's being stalked. Back to Pearl, she is hauling Cheeks down a hallway, saying there's been nothing wrong on the 4th or 5th levels so far, and since the lower levels are unaffected, it's somewhere else. She can feel the fight somewhere, and begins to hear James on the earpiece. She calls out to him, and she makes out the words event, and starts running again. At the helipad, James says Withrow is definitely fighting, and he's got a bad feeling due to how long it's taking, so Pearl needs to hurry. Withrow's vision begins to blur, as he runs away during their game of professional tag. He looks up and notices the sprinkler, and he jumps up to kick it. Hoping it'll activate, he hits it, smashing it, causing water to begin spraying. His eyes begin glowing, as he hardens the water around the SCP. He begins to strain as it's using a lot of stamina, and we see him on the floor with it being frozen. Back to the interview with Withrow, James asks what's the duration of the ability, and even if it defies the laws of science, he's sure there's a limit in both range and duration, right? Withrow says his ability is connected to his mental, and it varies depending on his condition. Once it hardens, it lasts for about an hour, then it turns back to a liquid. He says he hasn't struggled this much in ages, and it must be because of his arm, and he decides to finish it. We see a swipe, and Withrow's head slowly begins to tilt sideways, showing us that he received a fresh fade. He drops to his knees, and the final thing he sees is that there is a second Inhuman behind him. F in the comments, he was a cool character. At the helipad, James says that Pearl and Withrow are about to meet, then he notices Withrow's vitals fade out. He's confused why it suddenly went off, then realizes it's only Withrow's that's disappeared. He begins to understand the implications of this. He starts spamming the refresh key for the new video. We see Pearl on the screen about to enter the room, and she jumps at the door, bursting through it. The SCP turns over to see her, while she sees Withrow's thoughts lying on the floor. She does a double take, looking at the monsters and then his thoughts again. She begins to have a flashback of her talking to Withrow, saying that everyone is thankful for him joining their team, James specifically. He calls James annoying, saying he will not wear the suit he has for him. Pearl warns him that SCP are more dangerous than he thinks, and that there's a chance for them to die in combat. She hopes the other will act calmly and will stay rational. Withrow thinks about it, while she explains that retreating is often a viable strategy, and she doesn't want one of them to go on a rampage because they aren't able to control their emotions. Since it'll be harder to perform if you're not calm. The one that survives needs to protect the world. Withrow says she's saying some useless stuff because if it's an opponent she can't beat, he would dip out of there since he'd lose to it. Then he tries to act cool while saying he isn't the sentimental type, but he just helped a random kid on the street. Even Pearl understands he's a softie. She starts to realize she spouted some nonsense. The SCP begins to ready itself, then Pearl dashes across the room, sending furniture flying. She readies her fist, because she can't keep her rationality, and hits the SCP directly in the face, causing him to rubberneck into the floor. Some of its teeth fly out of its mouth. She's pissed, then quickly comes back to her senses as she sees Wiro's head. She goes to close his eyes. Then the SCP leaps at her, attacking her arm, but it quickly understands that it has barely scratched her. She continues closing Wiro's eyes, then slowly turns around at the SCP while glowing. This instinctively causes it to leap backward, but she grabs its tentacle thing, resolves herself, then turns, yeeting it into the floor, causing it to bounce along the ground, then slamming into the wall. She says that since she started cleaning up the trash, this has been the worst day, so now she'll be doing things their way. So don't even think about how it'll die. She begins to walk toward it, while the other one begins to break free. The SCP that got thrown into the wall, digs itself into it and begins to scream. Then readies its legs, leaping off the wall at Pearl. It begins to swing at her head, but she slaps it out of the way. Then quickly uppercuts the SCP, knocking its last tusk out. Then she begins to follow it up, and hits him in the other side of his face, then draws her fist back again, full sending it at the SCP. The impact begins to warp its body, then it gets launched into a pillar. She begins to slowly approach it, saying she plans to make this day a living hell for it, but that it doesn't deserve to be alive for the duration of the beating. So she'll just kill it now, and tells it to get up. It struggles to breathe kind of like a pug, while the frozen one begins to slowly get out of its ice cube. At a presidential meeting, we hear some people asking if James still hasn't contacted them, and there's been nothing since he asked them to cancel the nuke order. Some people begin to speculate Pearl and Wiro have lost, and is quickly told to shut up. Others keep talking to the president, until someone tells them all to quiet down, saying nothing will be solved if they panic. He then tells the president that the fact Pearl asked for the nukes to be called off means they can handle the situation. So he must call back the fighter jets without hesitating. Someone else says not quite, then explains that his decision-making is part of the reason the bunker is in this panic, and he's spoiling the atmosphere. We learn the man is named Marcus, and when the first guy goes to speak, he tells him not to interrupt him. He then explains how the president already authorized his biometrics, and the launch sequence is ready, and with the jets ready, he needs to give the striker orders now. The guy advocating to trust in Pearl tells him that they are still on the scene, then asks if they've ever failed. Marcus asks why James isn't briefing them if it's all under control, and that their other assault forces were instantly annihilated, and now Jamie's team is radio silent. He says in the 1 in a million chance they fail, would the man be able to take responsibility for that, and if he doesn't agree, would anyone else do it? Peter Griffin asks if he thinks launching the nukes is an easy thing to do, and brings up all of the passengers and crew members. Marcus asks his assistant Kondo, how long until the opera reaches the shore, and Kondo tells him less than an hour and a half. Marcus then asks whether they think it's enough time to debate these things, then explains how Florida has a ton of people living in it, so rather than a fight, they can't see. Isn't it best to minimize the risks? They continue to argue, then the president tells them all to stop. He says he plans to cancel the striker on the opera, and will not listen to their opinions. This angers Marcus, and the rest are just asleep. He recalls a flashback he had with Pearl, and he's talking to her at a funeral, saying that he keeps piling on debts to the superheroes. She asks what debts he means. Because you can't put a price on saving people. It cuts back to Pearl getting Spider-Man'd by one of the SCPs, and we see it's the one she absolutely bodied. She's surprised it's shooting spiderwebs on the verge of death. Then we see the chameleon one breaks free from its ice cube, quickly goes to bite the trapped Pearl, and bites her shoulder. It begins to morph into Wiro's face, and when she goes to punch it, she stops herself from hitting it. Then takes another second to find her resolve, and grabs onto the monster's forehead, throwing it into the wall, and she realizes why Wiro lost. She begins talking about how he was foul-mouthed, and had a bad personality, so he probably won't go to heaven. So when the monster meets him in hell, beg for his forgiveness. She begins to exude a yellow aura while screaming, and punches the monster, deleting his upper half, and we see the attack's force clashing with the side of the ship, eventually bursting out, creating a massive hole, and a beam across the sky. James and the helicopter pilot both get blinded by the beam, and he tells the pilot to open the doors. We see Pearl standing in front of the monster, or what is left of it. And James gets out of the helicopter and sees the hole left by her attack. He sees her standing in the middle of it, and she begins to walk out of it. She looks down at James, then hops down the ledge. His face looks shocked, and she tells him something, and he begins to tear up, then drops to his knees. And begins to hit the floor, while crying. Pearl looks regretfully, and back at the bunker, a man enters the room to tell the rest about Pearl succeeding. And everyone in the bunker seems really happy about it. The president looks relieved, then the man looks worried, and tells them about Withrow. Shocking everyone, and the room falls silent. On the news, we see reports of the opera safely reaching the shore, and we see Kang just chowing down as he watches the news. Ji-Roo, inside of the bathroom, hears Kang slurping, and gets angry because he told him to wait. Then he calls out to Kang, who continues munching because he didn't hear. Then Ji-Roo yells, startling Kang, who asks if he needs toilet paper. Ji-Roo tells Kang he told him to wait, and Kang quickly realizes there's no food left, so decides to try and quickly make some. He sees Kang, and tells him staring at the TV with a serious face won't work, and on the news, we see that Withrow's death has become public. Ji-Roo sweats because a superhuman died. And the news keeps talking about how many people are mourning his death. Ji-Roo tells him he understands it's serious, but make some damn ramen, and Kang says he's not in the mood, but Ji-Roo barks at him. Dan Yang says she's shocked that he died, and Nongi laughs, saying they aren't invincible, and he's certain that Withrow and Pearl fought individually. Because it's hard to believe someone could die on her watch. She asks if Pearl is that strong, and he tells her he's met her before, or rather she caught him watching her fight. And she lets him go even though he's suspicious. Yang calls her nice, and Nongi says that if Pearl didn't let him go, he'd have never met Yang. She says she usually doesn't believe him because he's a liar, but that Pearl is scary. It cuts to James trying to call Ben. And Ben asks what's going on. James tells him that Withrow's body has disappeared. Ben asks how, and James tells him he doesn't know either, but that it's top secret information, so don't let it leak, and even Withrow's funeral was cancelled, and there will be a briefing in a few days, and he wants Ben to look into the opera. Ben asks what he wants him to look into, and James says it's not difficult, and he sent him the information. Ben says he'll get it done. Both of them hang up and get pissed that someone stole Withrow's body. It cuts to Ji-Roo walking down the street. He's looking for someone and says it's problematic, wondering where she ran off. He gets a flashback of the woman telling him to email him if something happens, and that she won't be back for a while, so don't waste money and get a part-time job. He says he ignored her advice too much, and he's out of money, then wonders if it's because Kang is a piggy, but he's slightly worried because she isn't replying to his emails. We learn it is his sister. He says he'll find a way to earn his own money, then he sees an arm wrestling competition sign that has some prize money. He stares at it for a second, then pulls out his phone. Then Kang answers the phone. Ji-Roo says, "Oh my little Snorlax, I'm surprised you answered instead of being asleep." Ji-Roo asks why it's so noisy, and it cuts back to Kang with the boys, and then he asks why Ji-Roo is calling. Ji-Roo says that he's proud Kang made friends, then tells him that he needs him to go somewhere on Sunday. Then it cuts back to James doing a briefing with Pearl, and James begins by saying they've counted 150 of the victims so far, and due to being on an isolated boost, the number of casualties has occurred. In this incident, the damage was only in the area the SCPs were active, and they didn't move much further than the upper deck, which is partially due to the government's attack force having a battle with them on the deck, keeping the attention of the monster on the top deck. It gave passengers a chance to run away, heavily reducing the number of casualties. While the attack forces died, their sacrifices weren't in vain. The next topic is Inhumans. The greatest miscalculation in this incident was that there were two, and according to Pearl, she asks to be the one to speak. She says the first guy she encountered when she arrived was a spider type, it even shot webs, and had 8 knife-like leg things, and was most likely the barber among the two. And after beating its ass, she could tell it was more durable than other Inhumans, and it was strong. However, it didn't have speed or hardness that Withrow couldn't deal with, so she guesses that he had an all-out brawl with the frozen one, and was ambushed by the spider one. The one that he had frozen resembled a chameleon, and could copy others' appearances. While it attacked her, it was in the middle of copying Withrow's appearance. While it's just her hypothesis, it's highly possible it copied someone and ambushed Withrow with it. Ben says it's painful just hearing about it. James says looking at the incident along with the previous Inhumans, the hypothesis seems to make sense, and they are unsure why, but they are monsters that possess characteristics of various organisms. However, the opera incident has left them with many questions, such as, why there are two in the same place, and the biggest problem, the disappearance of Withrow's body. The Inhumans were left untouched, while only Withrow's body has disappeared. James says since they noticed the body disappeared before the ship docked, that means it happened before the government arrived, and things don't add up. Ben says it either flew to heaven, or Withrow came back to life and walked away on his own. James says that since neither makes sense, the most likely scenario is, then Pearl finishes it by saying someone on the ship stole the body. James says exactly, and then asks Ben about what he requested. Ben says that the opera has a CCTV in their monitoring room, and he requested all of the data. While it'll take a week for it, they'll share the recordings when it's ready. So they will find whoever stole Withrow's body. It cuts to Taik and his group looking at the arm wrestling cup, and that it's open to anyone to join. Taik says he hates tournaments where noobs can participate, but there's too much money to pass by. And to get the entire Gundo gang. Sunday comes around, and we're at the tournament stadium. We see people arm wrestling, and the announcer welcomes everyone to the tournament, and due to having too many competitors, they are having a speedier preliminary round. The final 16 will be matched randomly, and the top 3 will receive money. Ji-Roo says there's a lot of people, and he's worried if Kang will make it on time. Kang wonders if his stomach hurts because of anxiety. Ji-Roo recalls last night, and he shows a sign of Ketchup Man, saying the tournament is just as important as Ketchup Man's visit to Korea, and it's rare to see him in person. Kang says he cares more about that than the tournament. Ji-Roo says that's a bad mindset, and this is more important. Ji-Roo begins to recap the tournament, like a certain YouTube channel. He explains to Kang that it'll take 3 hours at most, and once they win, they can meet Ketchup Man at the airport. Kang asks if they'll get autographs. Ji-Roo rummages for a second, then pulls out the Ketchup Man uniforms, and that it's perfect. The announcer asks for number 82, and Ji-Roo asks what Kang's number is, and it's 82. Ji-Roo tells him to stop standing around, and get going. Kang waddles over for his first match. Ji-Roo tells him to remember the training, and not to be nervous. He recalls them practicing how to control his strength, because he needs to look like he's struggling against the others. Kang says he wishes it would end faster. Some random guy comes up, saying he knows it's an open tournament, but still. They should give him a real opponent, not some kid. Kang doesn't answer, and the guy says he'll go easy on him. They prepare for the match, and Kang is nervous, saying he needs to control his power. While the other guy says, he's gonna crush him. The match starts, and the guy begins to struggle while screaming, while trying his best to move Kang's arm. Then Kang begins to put him down, causing a lot of dust to kick up. Kang realizes he did it with too much power, and the match ends. The other contestants wonder where the sudden gust of wind came from, and Ji-Roo awkwardly says this is great, the opponent was weaker than expected. So maybe he had an injury or something. He quickly goes to Kang, asking if he plans to reveal his identity. Kang tells him it's harder than he thinks to control his power. Another match begins, and the man introduces himself as the runner-up last year. He introduces himself and starts to say not to feel bad if he loses, then gets off-screened, while Kang gets chewed out again. Another guy does the same thing to Kang, saying he doesn't want to hurt him, and it's a repeat scenario of Kang being chewed out. The announcer watches it and says it's unusual, and now the tournament can properly begin. I won't go through every other match, but we see one of the men is part of the Submu Martial Arts Academy, and has his boys there supporting him. The director of the academy says that the man must win because the dojo renovations are costing a ton. His name is Obangwon. They introduce Kang next, and we see that his opponent is a monk from the Gyurem temple. His boys are also there to support him. Radish Head and Taik are also there, and are fighting each other, and their gang begins to laugh at it, calling it domestic violence. The next group is announced, but one of the people is missing, so they show his opponent as Park Gundo, the leader of the Gundo gang. Now we have the full bracket shown, with all of the participants, so it'll officially start now. It cuts to a plane, and Ketchup Man says his pants are giving him a wedgie. His manager says that the entertainment company said he must wear his suit when they land, and to understand. We learn his name is Rose, and he tells Dion, Ketchup Man, to think of his audience. Dion says that, of course, we learn he's an actor in a popular drama, and he says some hero monologue. Rose says he should stop method acting, and speak normally. Dion says he's going to sleep, and Rose tells him he should, since there's a long way to go. Taeik and Radish Head start their match. Taeik tells him to just give up so he doesn't waste energy. Since Gundo will get first and he's getting second, they'll split the money anyway. Radish says if that's the plan, it's best for him to advance. Taeik gets angry, while Radish explains that he's always been the stronger one, and asks if Taeik is in a position to order him around. Someone from the Gundo gang says Radish is about to go all out, and he only takes his glasses off when he plans to fight seriously, like unleashing a seal. I knew he was an Inhuman, just look at his ugly ass. Okay, never mind, he wears them to hide his kawaii anime girl eyes. Taeik notices the glasses thing and gets angry. The announcer tells them to get ready, and to fight. They begin struggling. The temple monk says he can sense the aura of a whirlpool inside of Kang, and he's the same because he possesses unimaginable strength. Kang looks surprised, and the man says he wants a glimpse of Kang's power. Then asks for them to start. The announcer says the other fight is already done, from the Submu Academy, and Bangwon says nobody should be his match, so it'll be his win. Gundo waits for his opponent, then sees on his phone that his gang took care of him. This angers him, and he walks over to Radish Head, kicking him in the stomach. Then slaps the piss out of Taeik, causing them to both lay on the floor. Everyone else is lost. Gundo asks if they think that beating up worthless trash, and doing this kind of thing is the same. He begins to walk off, and the announcer asks where he's going. He asks Gundo if he's forfeiting, and warns him if he walks off stage, it'll count as a DQ. He does it anyway, and the announcer wonders what's going on, but decides to go ahead with it anyway. So now it's time for the semi-final. Taeik and Kang set up at the table, and the Gundo guys begin to recognize him. They say he's the guy that's been hanging out with Chul, and they don't really like him. Taeik says he knew he recognized him, then calls him Chul's lackey. Kang ignores him, and Taeik says he's not in the mood, and he should just lose ASAP, and if he even bothers trying, he'll bury him at school. The announcer begins the fight, and Taeik begins to struggle, while Kang thinks about how much of a douche this guy is, and starts to squeeze his hand, making him scream. Kang realizes he wasn't paying attention, and the announcer wonders if it's an injury, saying Taeik suddenly collapsed. But announced Kang the winner anyways, and now it's time for the finals. Between Kang and the Submu Academy guy. Ji-Roo just came out of the bathroom, skipping the cutscenes until the finals, and he cheers Kang on. Then they quickly hear the Submu Academy boys cheering on their guy, making some one-piece poses for him. The finals will now commence. The man introduces himself to Kang as the head instructor, and that his name is Moongu, and win or lose, not to have regrets. Kang agrees, and they ready their hands. The announcer says they have both defeated many strong opponents, then asks who the final victor will be. Kang and Moongu look at each other, and the announcer tells them to get ready. Everyone begins to feel tense with anticipation. Then the match starts. The announcer talks about how you can feel it across the entire stadium. Moongu says he can't believe it anymore. This isn't a match, and he's holding on for dear life. The pressure is ridiculous. Kang makes a fake strained scream, then lowers his hand until he touches the mat. Ji-Roo says that looked natural, and Bangwon is sad. Kang is declared the victor. Then he asks Kang if he's thought about how he'll spend the prize money. Kang tells him he doesn't know, and the announcer says he could donate it to those in need, to help the unfortunate. Kang looks over to see a disaster relief group, and he says it's a good cause, and he would like to donate. The announcer asks if he's sure, and Kang says yes. He compliments Kang, then asks if he'll donate it all, and Kang begins to blush, saying yes. Ji-Roo starts to sweat, saying he's about to fume, and Moongu begins to cry to his master. He tells him to stop crying, and gives a speech about how not to show tears, and reminds Moongu that he's still earned due to second place. Moongu says he's the one crying though. Kang and Ji-Roo head to the bus, and Kang says he's hungry. Ji-Roo tells him, just in case they should leave now. They begin to walk by Taeik, and he calls out to him, saying he'll see him in school. Ji-Roo starts barking at them, while Kang guides him away. Moongu approaches them too, saying it was an excellent match and his arm is numb, then hands him his business card. Kang says he'll give them a visit, then he overhears them talking about food, and Kang says he wants to learn martial arts now. Bang One starts to look at the trophy, saying it's stunning, and he asks if he can take a look. Ji-Roo says yeah, and goes to hand it to him, but realizes he's already holding it. Kang puts his hand in front of him, telling him to stand back. Bang One says he's a little kitten on the edge of his nerves, or should he say his instincts just recognize a superior animal, and that this is how they meet, and says that's the face behind the mask. He tells Kang he's sure there are a lot of questions, but he'll keep it short, and to come find him at Yongpo Mountain. Confusing both Kang and Ji-Roo. It cuts to the airport where Dion will be landing, and an SCP's grippers are seen stomping on screen, then it begins to screech into the air. At the airport as well, Kang and Ji-Roo are waiting for Dion to land. Ji-Roo wonders why the old man took the trophy, and Kang asks if he's sure this is the right area because nobody is here. Then they suddenly hear the alert sound go off for Inhumans, alarming both of them. The voice says that an Inhuman has been spotted on the runway, and all citizens should seek shelter immediately. A plane begins to touch down, and the Inhuman looks at it, and begins to run like Ezra Miller. Ji-Roo says he doesn't have it, and all he has is the mask and earpiece, but the hat and rest aren't here. Kang grabs it out of his hands and dashes off, as Ji-Roo calls out to him. The announcement continues, by telling people to hurry and evacuate, and Kang spots a man's white cap. So he leaps on the side of the escalator, grabs the man's hat, and runs off with it. The announcements continue as he works his way through the airport, until he gets into the bathroom. He looks in the mirror, and remembers how hard Ji-Roo worked on the Ketchup Man drip, so he decides to take it off and put it in the trash for now. He rips off the logo of the hat, and puts it on. Then puts on his mask, tying it up. On Ketchup Man's flight, they are about to touch down at the airport. Rose sighs out of relief they are about to land, while Dion is slumped. One of the pilots notices something, and the other asks what's wrong. He tells him there's something in front of them, then we see the SCP in the reflection of his eyes. As the Inhuman rushes at them, they try to pull up, but the SCP takes some Usain Bolt strides, then prepares to jump, flying into the air toward the plane. The pilots scream as he gets close. Then it hits their wing, shaking the plane, causing Dion to smack his forehead. We see the monster landing after colliding with the plane. Dion asks what's going on, and Rose says he's unsure. The pilot tells people what's going on, and to prepare for an emergency landing, so brace for impact. The landing gear stretches out, then they start bouncing along the runway, damaging the plane. The SCP sees this, and makes a funny joke, then sees a forklift and walks over to it, grabbing onto it. We see Dion slumped over, and the passengers begin to panic, talking about how there's an Inhuman on the runway. He watches as it lifts the forklift, saying they all need to escape. The monster prepares to throw it, and the man begins to panic as the SCP eats the forklift. It soars through the air, getting closer and closer to the plane, until we see Kang appear. He quickly closes the gap, readying himself in the air. He kicks the forklift, knocking it away from the plane, then he lands. The SCP is lost, as they have a WWE stare down, and the forklift crashes behind Kang. The passenger sees this, and starts to cry after seeing Kang. Even though the monster is happy to see him, Kang grabs the forklift, then begins to lift it. The SCP is confused, then watches as Kang yeets it toward him. It flies through the air, about to hit the SCP, but it avoids it by leaping into the air. It then notices that Kang is already there to greet him. Kang prepares a spinning back kick, then hits it directly in the stomach, causing it to ink. He follows it up with a hammer fist, knocking it down, sending it straight into the floor. Kang lands on the ground too, then says it was odd, that it felt like he was hitting clay. Ji-Roo calls out to him over the earpiece, and he sighs that he has finally reached him. Kang asks where he is, and Ji-Roo tells him he's near the gate, and since he's not wearing the action camera, he has to hack the control tower cameras, and he's concerned that Kang has nothing to wear. Kang tells him he's topless. Ji-Roo says that's a good decision, and once he gains access, he can watch. Kang tells him to stop, and just go home, because it's dangerous here. So get far away from here. Kang gets decked in the face, but manages to catch his balance, grabbing onto the SCP's arm. He slams it into the floor, ragdolling it across the runway. It crashes into a wall, then Kang rushes in toward the SCP as it groans. Its cheeks begin to puff up, and Kang notices, but it spits some dark goo at him. Kang does his best to block it, but the SCP doesn't miss a beat, rushing straight in, socking Kang in the face, and as he loses his balance, SCP goes in for a follow-up, hitting Kang again. We see his eye is covered in ink, but he stops himself from moving. As he's caught the SCP's punch, the SCP shudders in fear, then leaps away from him. It begins screeching like a kid who lost his iPad, and Kang wonders what's going on. Wiro chimes in on the earpiece, telling him he's got access to the cameras now, and that it's being shared with a news network. Kang says he told him to go home, so why is he here? Wiro tells him he's part of the team, and he knows he can't help much, but he doesn't want to leave him by himself. Kang is touched by this, then Wiro asks what condition the monster is in. Kang calls him an octopus mf'er, but can't tell because it just keeps screaming. Kang is then surprised to watch as it starts to spit egg things into the air. They land all over the airport, some landing on the plane, and others around it. The passengers are confused, then one flies through the window beside Wiro, and he wonders what it is. Pearl's team, watching this, also realize that this situation is getting worse, and wonder if Whitecap can really solo it. Ben suggests they recruit him into their team, while Pearl just grows angry. From one of the eggs, we see some hands crack out from the egg, and an ugly midget thing emerges, then it steps out from the shell. We see Wiro holding his breath in a corner. Kang starts talking to Wiro, alerting the monster. Wiro realizes he's screwed, and turns around to see the monster has noticed him. Wiro grabs his phone, and starts running away from the SCP. From the octopus SCP, we see some bumps protruding on its back, then it sprouts into extra tentacles. Kang is a little shocked, but decides to stay alert. Kang hears Wiro panicking on the earpiece, and calls out to him. Then looks over in his direction, deciding he needs to save Wiro. He begins sprinting toward it, but quickly sees in front of him one of the hatchling SCPs jumping toward him. He draws his fist back, then backhands its head off, but doesn't stop running, and leaps toward where Wiro is, but quickly gets blocked off by the octopus SCP. It clasps its hands together, then slams it down, sending Kang to the floor. It sees Kang lying there, and decides to dropkick him. It lands on Kang, then goes back to Wiro's POV, and we see that he's panting because he can't escape the SCP. He realizes he's in a tough spot, then says he needs to use his head, but spots something. It's a woman huddling in fear, and he wonders what to do. The SCP begins screeching. This scares the woman, and she screams. It hears her, then begins slowly walking in her direction. As it gets to her, we see a fire extinguisher smack it, as Wiro tells the woman to run. The hatchling grabs onto his leg, causing him to scream, then throws him into the wall, rocking his brain. He slowly slides down the wall, trying to stand up. He realizes what Kang has been facing. He begins to cry, saying he bet Kang has felt lonely, and he's sorry. The hatchling goes to eat him, but gets kneed in the face, and we see that B has come in clutch to save our boy. He tells his squad to focus on all of the hatchlings, and support Whitecap. Wiro sees him, recognizing him from the Inchon port incident. As the hatchling begins to stand up, B begins to unzip his third arm, and we see his hardware has been upgraded. He grabs onto his fingers, while recalling what the scientist told him about how it's called a Kessler rail. The item has a powerful output, but at the cost of extreme energy consumption. B tells him he remembers seeing the prototype. The scientist explains how a genius has joined the ISSTF. She developed the Natum capsule, which fixes energy consumption, and that his arm is based on her tech. The downside is that it's unstable, so he's going to be their test subject. He also explains that the trigger is his fingers, and the duration is 2 minutes. So now we know why B is grabbing his fingers, as he pulls them back. Some of the arm drops off, exposing the cannon. Wiro is shocked, and B calls for C to support. We see a cyborg dog run around the corner with capsules on its doggo vest. B grabs it, shoves it into his arm, then begins to power up. He looks in front of him to see the hatchling leap at him, but he blasts it in the head. Back to the plane's POV, two of the hatchlings are absolutely tearing the plane apart. The passengers begin to panic, then Rose tells them to calm down, as all of the healthy males should grab something to use as a weapon, since they can't sit around. One of the passengers tells him that's nonsense, as they aren't going to be a match for the SCPs. An older man on the plane tries to set him straight, but is interrupted by the hatchlings breaking in. They begin panicking, trying to run away. Then it takes us back to B's POV, and he's unloading his second shot, but the SCP is still alive. It begins to screech, and he points the barrel to its head, then finally blows its head off. Saying that he needs to aim for the same part twice, B is surprised that even the Kessler rail can't one-shot them, so he isn't ready to face an adult. He notices another one coming. Probably due to the noise, and then another one as well. C barks at him, and he realizes there's only one capsule left. He says damn it, as this might be the end of him. Now back to the plane, the passengers' screams begin to change to confusion instead. We see a dent on the outside of the plane, and then it is followed by an explosion. We hear Dion asking where the hatchling's mother is, and he shit talks it. The monster's corpse hits the floor, and Dion turns around, seeing a woman scream that there's another one that has gotten inside. It screeches, then turns over to see Dion squaring it up. He tells it that it's ill-mannered to make a woman scream, and it should knock before entering. He palms its head like a basketball. And the passengers are confused by the fact Dion is a superhuman, pretending to be a superhuman. One of the dudes cringe because he made fun of Dion for pretending. Rose calls out to Dion while the monster plays patty cake on his face, and he tells Dion to explain what's going on. Dion says only a few knew, and it's probably the end of his acting career. He thanks Rose for being with him thus far, and he's been happy working with him. He then apologizes to him for tricking him. And Rose begins to cry while thinking about all of the times they've spent together. Then tells Rose he's fired, as he jumps out of the roof with the hatchling. As he's flying through the air, he says don't cry, boys, don't be afraid, girls. As he turns the hatchling into a meat crayon, he says the red substance you see is merely ketchup. Another one begins to run up behind him, and he says he can't get into the mood by singing the opening theme to himself. He lets out a sigh, then turns around to close hanger the hatchling, deleting its face. Its body slumps onto the floor, and Dion looks over to see the mama octopus, and starts walking over to it, while saying he won't be going easy, and he'll make it go extinct. Rose and the gang are surprised by Ketchup Man, and the news starts to broadcast how Dion is approaching it. James says he's so lost on what's going on, and what to do with the info. Ben says it's wild to think Dion has been pretending to be a superhuman, while being one. James asks Pearl if she knew. She shakes her head no. She remembers meeting him once, then says she had no idea. Back to B, he's preparing his final shot, then lets it rip, doming a hatchling. We see he's scratched up, with some corpses on the floor around him, then his arm gun thing falls off. He says he hopes it's the last one, because he cannot move anymore. Then realizes it is still alive. He tells C to paw it, and C air buds towards him. He grabs its paw, then pulls it off, revealing a hidden dagger. He says it might be ineffective, but if he can just rip through its eye. We see blood splurt, then B's face becomes strained, and we see he's been stabbed in the side, trading blows with it. He begins to spit up blood, then yells die while repeatedly stabbing the hatchling, until he gets the blade inside, then it stops moving. He begins to pant while holding onto his wound, then drops to the floor. C starts barking at him, and we see Ji-Roo is still knocked out too. Back to outside, Kang is chilling with the Octo SCP. As it starts screaming at Dion, he tells it to shut up, then hits it with a terrible one-liner. He says after that impact, White Cap must have gotten defeated. Dion says he's going to turn it into sashimi, then notices that Kang is standing back up. The Octo turns around to also watch Kang. Dion is surprised he woke up, and even the monster looks confused. We see Kang is relatively unscathed, but his eyes are pure white. Dion's face begins to tense up as he sinks into the floor. Same with Octo. Even the airport begins to shake as the area around Kang begins to feel a heavy pressure. Inside a Resident Evil room, Yang asks Nangi what is going on, saying it looks like there's a distortion, or some kind of pressure is being applied around them. Nangi says it's not like that, and she asks him to explain. He says it isn't a skill, or an ability, it's just Whitecap's pure energy, it's just that overwhelming, and is suffocating his surroundings, but this is quite unnatural. Yang asks what he means. Nangi tells her that he normally wouldn't do this, since his habit is to observe during fights, but now his power is uncontrolled, almost as if he is unconscious. Yang thinks about it, and Nangi says it's surprising that Ketchup Man appeared, but now this has happened, and he laughs. It cuts to Octo sprinting at Kang, and it jumps for a Superman punch, and right as it goes to hit Kang, he slightly turns his head, and attacks it so fast we cannot even see it, just leaving fist imprints into Octo. Dion just watches as Kang grabs it by the throat, and it spits up on him. Dion starts to recap what happened, and how in the span of 1 second, Kang hit it 7 times, which means Kang is on his level at least, so Kang is just skill gapping this mob. Dion wonders if he's imagining it or not, saying Kang looks like he's in a bad state. Octo's tentacle arms stretch out, surrounding Kang. We see his eye, then he gets covered as Octo squeezes him. The squeezing stops abruptly, then we hear something as Kang brute forces out of his grasp, the tentacles land on the floor, and the SCP is even knocked down. Kang starts to approach it, and Dion says it's over. We hear someone say hold up, Kang's head turns, and Dion is shocked. As he turns around to someone saying to let him go. Dion is puzzled when we see Jeffree Star say this isn't a request, and calls them by their hero names. Everyone continues standing there. Dion is confused that it's talking, even though it's an Inhuman, and he also couldn't sense them. He wonders what it is. The Inhuman says it seems like he's confused due to him speaking, and asks if it's because he's an Inhuman. Dion stays alert, as the Inhuman says it feels terrible that humans think humans are inferior, but they fear them at the same time, so it's quite weird, while extending his arm. Octo begins to float, but Kang is still in that unconscious state. The Inhuman makes a come here motion, and Octo begins to float toward him, as he keeps making fun of the Inhuman name. Yang, watching this, is confused, saying it used an ability, and that it's wearing clothes. She calls out to Nangi, but he doesn't answer, so she does it again. She says the face he is making is scary. Nangi says that it's definitely Inhuman, but it's quite shocking, especially the clothed one, to think such a monster exists, and he's more powerful than groups of humans. He says he expected it, that there would be some dangerous supernatural monsters, but he has a different reason for being surprised. Them showing up now means that they have a reason. He also tells Yang they might need to open the gate, as they can't let Dion and Kang lose. Yang says she doesn't wanna. Back at the airport, Octo drops onto the floor, as the clothed one kneels over it, asking if he remembers him, then tells him to answer. Dion also realizes that it used an ability to pull Octo over, and that he's on a whole different level. Rather, he's never seen a talking Inhuman, and he's built. He says it's 3 times the size of an ordinary human. The Inhuman continues asking Octo if he remembers him, and that if he makes him repeat, he'll kill him. Octo begins to stutter heavily, then screeches at him. The Inhuman doesn't reply, then says he's puzzled. He puts his hand in Octo's mouth, saying he was told not to kill, but Octo has already made him mad, as he shoves his fist into its mouth. Dion watches as it rips Octo's heart out, saying he'll use it for something else, because Octo doesn't deserve to fight in a war. He throws it behind him to his friend named Vanisher, saying to keep it safe. Vanisher opens its mouth, then catches it. The other one asks why Octo is so stupid and arrogant, then says he'll fix them all. Kang, still unconscious, begins rushing in. Dion calls him dumb, then jumps in front of Kang, telling him to stop, as they shouldn't attack rashly. He starts to explain, but notices that Kang is preparing an attack. We see a massive shockwave. Even the Inhuman is confused, and we see Dion has caught Kang's fist and is grunting, while being pushed back. Dion says it's as he expected, and that Kang must be unconscious. Kang's aura begins to pressure Dion, and he begins to grunt while some purple sparks begin to emerge. He says nobody seems to know when enough is enough, and the Inhuman watches as Ketchup Man starts to power up. He neutralizes Kang's aura, then calls him a brat, rearing his fist back telling him to stay down. Then he punches Kang straight in the face, sending him flying away, knocking him through some parts of the airport. Kang breaks through the roof, landing atop it. Dion says it's been a while since he's had to use this much power, then tells the Inhuman it's his turn. and the Inhuman says bring it on then. Dion quickly dashes, the Inhuman notices he's focusing the power in his hand. The Inhuman says he's curious, but this is just too cocky while grasping his hand. Stone begins to stretch out from the floor, surrounding Dion, collapsing on him. The Inhuman's name is revealed to be Pan, and he's told to come back quickly. The person calling him is named Morel. Dion breaks through the stone, rushing at Pan. He notices something, a weird circle in front of Pan, then a giant hand stretches out from it, hitting Dion. He stares at Pan, then Pan tells Vanisher it's time to skedaddle. Vanisher floats above Pan, then stretches outward, creating a portal thing above Pan. Who compliments Dion, saying he was trying to kill him, and far from the vital point, he couldn't even get a critical hit, then says he looked down on him too much, and it was a valuable meeting. But unfortunately, the next time they meet, everyone will die. Pan jumps up toward Vanisher, and begins to be absorbed into him. We see that it's some kind of tunnel, with a portal at the end, and he ends up in the ocean. Pan begins to sink down into it, and as he sinks, we get a flashback to 2012. We see a submarine, much like the Titan, and they are talking about how they are missing the premiere for Ketchup Man. As they keep going to the ocean's depths, they talk about how it's extra dark today. One of them says that it's always dark inside of Pandora's box, unless you open it. The people inside jokingly talk about how they've failed so many missions so far. One of them tells another named Jake that he shouldn't be obsessed with results, and that real exploration isn't just finding new stuff, but is interrupted by someone yelling for him that they've found something reflecting their waves at the bottom of the ocean. They begin to descend down, and activate their camera. The chief notices something outside of the sub, and he asks if the lights are on the maximum. They say no, and then they change it. As things go bright, they see the wreckage of planes, and boats, and just wonder what all of this stuff is. Some other stuff happens, but it's too technical for the recap, so they find some readings that say there's something underground, and they begin their operation to dig into the ground. Because the chief tells them they might have found it, Pandora's box. If you've watched till the end, comment, Osmosis Jones, to let me know. Subscribe for more videos like this, leave a like or a comment to help the channel out. Thanks for watching.